2:34 a.m., Los Angeles Police Department call center. The phone rings, the operator answers, and on the other end is the trembling, whispering voice of an elderly woman. "It started again. Please come. There are screams coming from that house on Mulholland again." The operator asks for the address. The woman hesitates, finally saying, "Marlon Brando's house," but adds, "Please don't mention my name. I'm scared." The phone hangs up. This call was made in 1987, and according to records, it was just one of dozens of calls to the police about that house. Neighbors had complained for years, hearing the sounds of fighting, screams, broken glass, sometimes gunshots. But every time the police came, they encountered the same scene. Brando opened the door, calm and polite, saying, "There must be some misunderstanding." The police looked inside, saw nothing, and left. Until 1990, when the police were called to that house one last time, but this time for a different reason. There was a body, and that night, the dark secrets of the Mulholland Drive mansion would finally begin to surface. But the truth is, the murder was just the beginning. What happened in that house for years? What were those sounds the neighbors heard? And why was Marlon Brando screaming alone in the garden at midnight? For more true stories about the dark side of Hollywood, please click the subscribe button. Now let's uncover the 12-year mystery hidden behind the walls of Marlon Brando's mansion. In 1976, Marlon Brando was 52 years old, at the peak of his career, rich from The Godfather, but unhappy. He wanted to move out of his old house in the Hollywood Hills because it held too many memories, ex-wives, fights, disappointments. The real estate agent showed him a mansion on Mulholland Drive, a large property with 3 acres of land, an 8-bedroom main house, a pool, a guest house, and a garden. But most importantly, it was isolated, with the nearest neighbor 100 meters away. Tall trees surrounding the house, offering complete privacy. Brando decided to buy the house as soon as he saw it, paying $2 million, an astronomical price at the time. But when moving in, he made strange requests. Raise the garden walls to 3 meters high, install security cameras at the main gate, hang blackout curtains on the windows facing the neighboring houses. The real estate agent asked why he wanted so much privacy. Brando replied that he just wanted peace and quiet, to be away from the outside world. The agent didn't understand then, but years later he would realize that Brando wasn't seeking peace. He was looking for a place to hide from himself, his past, and what he was about to do. Brando was alone when he moved into the mansion. His third wife, Tarita, lived in Tahiti, and his children were scattered, some with their mother, some at boarding school. Brando was alone in that big house and lived quietly for the first few months, never showing himself, never meeting the neighbors. But after a few months, the noises began. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, remembered. She would wake up in the middle of the night, hearing sounds in the distance, shouts, but the words were unintelligible. At first she thought she was dreaming, but it happened every night. She told her husband, who said, "Maybe he's having a party," and didn't care. But the sounds continued, sometimes at 3 o'clock, sometimes at 4. Always the same, like a man screaming, angry or unhappy. It was impossible to tell. Mrs. Patterson couldn't stand it for a few months, and one night she went to the window and looked in the direction of the sound. It was coming from the garden of Brando's mansion. There was a silhouette in the dark, moving, arms in the air, as if talking to someone, but there was no one there. Just Brando, alone, screaming into the night. The first official complaint was made in February 1978. One of the neighbors, a man who did not want to give his name, called the police and said that fighting noises were coming from Brando's house at midnight. A woman seemed to be screaming. Perhaps there was domestic violence. The police sent a patrol. Brando opened the door, smiled at the officers, apologized, said the guests were a little noisy. There was a woman inside, but she didn't want to talk. Everything was fine. The police left, wrote a report, and the incident was closed. But 6 months later, another call came in. This time from a different neighbor, again about noises at night, again about a fight. The police went again. Brando opened the door again, apologized again. There was a woman inside again, this time a different woman, and again they said there was no problem. A pattern was emerging, but no one saw it or wanted to see it. Because Brando was Marlon Brando, untouchable, Hollywood royalty. Police officers were reluctant to investigate his doorstep too closely. And so, the years passed. The calls continued. The police came and went. Nothing changed. By 1982, police records showed that complaints from that mansion had been repeated 15 times. Always the same things. Noises at night, fighting, screaming, sometimes the sound of glass breaking. Once, a neighbor claimed to have heard gunshots. The police came. Brando was alone in the garden. He had no gun. He said he was setting off fireworks. He apologized. The police searched for a gun, but couldn't find one and left. But the gun was real. The neighbor wasn't mistaken. Brando had simply hidden it. Years later, it would become clear that Brando had more than one gun in his house. None of them registered, and only he knew where they were hidden. And in 1990, one of those guns would be used, and a man would die. But it was still 1982, and no one had died yet. There were only sounds, only complaints, only Brando shouting alone in his garden. There was a theory among the neighbors. Maybe Brando was going mad. Maybe it was old age. Maybe loneliness. Maybe alcoholism. Because what they saw wasn't normal. 2 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock, the garden lights off, dark, but a silhouette moving in the moonlight. Brando was walking in the garden, sometimes running, sometimes stopping and shouting. Sometimes words could be heard. Most of the time they were incomprehensible, but some neighbors swore that Brando was calling someone's name, saying Mom, saying Dodie, saying why did you leave me? Brando's mother, Dodie, had died years ago. She was an alcoholic who had neglected Brando, and Brando had never forgiven her. And now, in the darkness of night, he was talking to her, accusing her, begging her. But he wasn't just talking to his mother. He was also talking to his father, Marlon Sr., a violent and cruel man who had beaten Brando and humiliated him. Brando was shouting at his father in the garden at night, saying, I don't forgive you, saying, you destroyed me. The neighbors didn't know it, but Brando was in therapy. His psychiatrist had told him to confront his childhood traumas, but Brando did it not in sessions, but at night, alone, in the darkness where no one could see him. And it wasn't healing him, it was making him worse. One neighbor, Tom Bradley, mustered the courage to knock on Brando's door one night. The next morning, he politely said, Mr. Brando, you're a bit noisy at night. Could you perhaps lower the volume? Brando looked at him with tired eyes, apologized. I can't sleep, Mr. Bradley, I walk at night. I'm sorry if I disturbed you. Tom didn't insist. He turned back, but told his wife, "That man is sick. There's something in his eyes, something frightening." And he was right. Brando couldn't sleep because when he did, he had nightmares. The same nightmare every night. His mother abandoning him, his father beating him, going on stage but forgetting his lines, everyone laughing. And he would wake up drenched in sweat, screaming, and go out into the garden because the four walls were suffocating him. For Brando, that mansion wasn't a home. It had become a prison. In 1984, something else happened. The public never heard about it, but the court records exist, in sealed files, difficult to access, but they exist. A woman, whose name was kept confidential, accused Marlon Brando of assault. According to the allegation, the woman was a guest at Brando's mansion. One night, they had an argument. Brando pushed her, she fell, and her arm was broken. She went to the hospital, got a report, and called the police. This time, when the police arrived, the incident seemed serious. The woman was injured. There was a hospital report, and Brando was questioned. Brando denied it, saying it was an accident, that the woman was drunk and fell, that he didn't touch her. The woman insisted and filed a lawsuit. But the case never went to court. A secret settlement was reached. Brando paid money. The woman withdrew the lawsuit, and a confidentiality agreement was signed. The amount was never disclosed, but according to rumors, it was $500,000, a large sum at the time. The woman never spoke about it again. The media never heard about it, and the case file was sealed. Brando was cleared, returned to his mansion, and life went on. But there were whispers in the neighborhood. The neighbors knew something was going on. They didn't know the details, but they sensed it. Bad things were happening in that house. After the allegations of violence, the police calls stopped for a while. Perhaps Brando was being careful. Perhaps he had quieted down. But in 1986, the calls started again. The nighttime noises, the neighbor complaints. One neighbor told the police, "We hear noises coming from that house almost every week. Women's voices, crying, sometimes screaming. But every time you come, you find nothing. Either they're hiding it very well, or we're going crazy." The police officer wrote a report, but what could he do? Brando was polite and cooperative. The women inside said, "There's no problem." There was no evidence, no crime. And Brando was famous. His lawyers were powerful. The police department didn't want to face political pressure, so the complaints were buried in files. Brando was left alone, and the mansion kept its mystery. In 1992, a completely different allegation surfaced. An anonymous tip came to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Undocumented immigrants were living in Brando's mansion. Federal agents sprang into action, obtained a search warrant, and raided the mansion. Brando was home, looked surprised, and said, "What do you want?" The agents searched the house, found no one in the main building, but when they went down to the basement, they found 3 beds, used, sheets dirty, clothes on the floor, food scraps. But no one was there. The agents asked Brando, "Whose beds are these?" Brando replied calmly, "I help people in need from time to time, workers from Mexico. I provide them with temporary shelter. Is that a crime?" The agents asked, "How many people stayed here?" Brando said he didn't know, maybe 5, maybe 10. He didn't keep track, he just helped. The agents couldn't find any illegal immigrants because Brando had warned them beforehand, and they had all fled. But there was evidence. Beds, clothes, food. Brando was fined, given a warning, and told that if he did it again, criminal proceedings would be initiated. Brando accepted, paid the fine, and the agents left. But the truth was more complicated. Was Brando really helping, or was something else going on in that basement? One of the neighbors remembered hearing sounds coming from the basement at night, voices talking, Spanish, sometimes music. And Brando would often go down to the basement, stay for hours, and when he came back up, he looked different, as if he had rested, relaxed. Maybe he really was helping. Maybe he just needed people to escape his loneliness, to talk to them, to feel good about himself. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe he wanted to control, to make people dependent on him, to fulfill their needs and feel powerful. Whatever the truth was, the basement was another secret of Brando's, another hidden room. May 16th, 1990, 11:47 p.m., a 911 call from the Mulholland Drive mansion. Christian Brando's voice, panicked. "There's been an accident. A man's been shot. Send help." The ambulance and police responded immediately. When they arrived at Mulholland, Christian opened the door, his hands shaking, his face pale. Inside, Doug Drolet, the boyfriend of Brando's daughter Cheyenne, was sitting on the couch, dead, with a bullet wound to his head. Marlon Brando was sitting on the stairs, crying, repeating, "What did my son do? My God, what did my son do?" The police secured the house, Christian was arrested, and Brando was taken to the hospital due to shock. And finally, 12 years later, the doors of that mansion were opened. The police entered, searched everywhere, examined every room, and what they saw surprised them. The detectives wrote their report. The house was messy, the furniture old and worn, the walls cracked, the carpet stained, the doors broken. This was not a millionaire's home. It was like an abandoned place. In the bedrooms, empty medicine bottles, alcohol bottles, cigarette butts. In the bathroom, bloodstains, old, cleaned but still visible. In the kitchen, there was rotten food and the refrigerator was empty. In the basement, there were still those 3 beds, looking as if they were still in use. And in the yard, in the backyard, there were Brando's footprints on the ground, worn paths in the grass, as if he had walked the same route every night. A circular path with no clear beginning or end. An endless cycle. The detectives understood that this house was not just a scene of a crime. It was a battlefield for years. A place where Brando fought with himself. Christian was arrested, tried for murder, found guilty of manslaughter, and sentenced to 10 years. Brando cried in court defending his son, admitted he was a bad father, said he was guilty. But when he returned home and was alone, guilt overwhelmed him. He became even more isolated in the mansion, didn't want to see anyone, didn't answer the phone, didn't open the door. Neighbors said that by that time, they couldn't even hear any sounds. Brando lived like a ghost, silently, unseen. When his daughter Cheyenne committed suicide in Tahiti in 1995, Brando completely collapsed, never leaving the mansion, not stepping outside for months. Friends tried to visit, but he wouldn't open the door. Food deliveries were left at the door for hours, but Brando didn't take them in. The house became worse than a dump. In 2001, Brando finally decided to move out of the mansion. He told his friends, "That house is cursed. I have to leave or I'll die there too." He tried to sell the mansion, but no one wanted to buy it, because it was now infamous. The place where Christian committed murder. The place where Brando went mad. He eventually rented it out, but tenants didn't stay long. They said they heard noises, that the house wasn't peaceful, that the energy was heavy. Brando moved to another house, smaller, simpler, but he never found peace. When he died in 2004, he was still talking about the nightmares from the Mulholland mansion, saying, "That house destroyed me. I lost myself there." Today, the Mulholland Drive mansion still stands, with new owners, renovated, cleaned, refurbished. But the neighbours still remember those years, those sounds, those late-night calls. Mrs. Patterson, now in her 80s, still lives there, still remembers. "Sometimes at night I still think I hear sounds, but I'm old now. Maybe I'm imagining things. But I know one thing. Bad things happened in that house. Very bad things." And Marlon Brando didn't find peace there. He disappeared there. Brando's mansion was not just a house, it was an extension of his mind, dark, chaotic, full of secrets. Every room was a wound, every wall a memory, every night the screams in the garden were the echo of the battle inside Brando. The murder was just the explosion. But the real tragedy was the years of silent collapse, the self-destruction of a genius.